Hey guys, tonight we're traveling back to a time when winter wasn't just a season. It was a survival test you took every night, whether you liked it or not. Picture this. You're a medieval peasant, trudging back to your hut after a long day hauling stones, cutting wood, or wrangling a plow that's basically just a stick and some hope. The wind's howling like a banshee through the bare branches. Your breath curls white in front of your face, and your hands, wrapped in fingerless mittens, if you're lucky, feel like they belong to someone else entirely. You push open the low wooden door to your home, and the cold doesn't stop at the threshold. Why would it? Your walls are made of timber slats and wattle and daub, mud and straw smeared together like bad porridge. And your windows, if you have any, are maybe covered in oiled linen, which means you can sort of see out, and the wind can definitely see in. So, before you get comfortable, take a moment to like the video and subscribe, but only if you genuinely enjoy what I do here. And hey, let me know in the comments where you're listening from and what time it is over there. I always love seeing that. Now, dim the lights, maybe turn on a fan for that soft background hum, and let's ease into tonight's journey together. The warmth in your home comes from a small central hearth. If the fire's still burning from the day, it casts a faint orange glow across the dirt floor. But the smoke? Oh, it's just kind of lingering. Chimneys are rare luxuries for people like you. More often, the smoke rises into the rafters and slowly leaks through the thatched roof. It stings your eyes and seeps into everything. Your blankets, your hair, your lungs. You probably smell like bacon, but without the joy of having eaten any. Your bed is a low wooden frame, if you're lucky, or just a mattress of straw tucked into a corner. Maybe you share it with your spouse, maybe with your kids, maybe with your spouse, your kids, your mother-in-law, and a neighbor's sick nephew who got snowed in. Everyone piles together, not just because you like each other, but because body heat is the original medieval thermostat. There's no down comforter here, just coarse woolen blankets, sometimes stuffed with bits of moss or feathers. The straw pokes through everything. It's itchy, it's musty, and it has a habit of developing company if you don't refresh it regularly. Fleas? Check. Lice? Double check. But hey, at least they're warm, too. And if you're thinking, surely they had some clever medieval heating trick? Not really. They used what they had. Heated stones, wrapped in cloth, sometimes placed at the foot of the bed. Clay pots filled with embers that glowed like sleepy dragons. And, more often than not, just pure, shivering endurance. You curl into yourself, knees drawn up, trying to conserve warmth. If you have a dog, or even a half-wild cat, it's pressed against your side, sharing the cold. If you're wealthy enough to own a pig, well, we'll get to that later. But don't be surprised if it's snoring somewhere in the room. Outdoors, the wind scours the village paths and rattles the shutters. Your walls creak. You hear the distant cough of another peasant and the occasional wolf howl echoing from the woods. Though historians still argue whether wolves were truly a regular threat to villages or just nighttime folklore amplified by hunger and fear. You try to fall asleep, but your feet are like ice blocks. You rub them together. You press them into the backs of whoever's in bed with you, earning a grunt or an elbow, depending on. And all the while, you pray that the fire lasts the night, because relighting it is no easy task. But that too, we'll save for a little later. Still awake? Good. Because you've got a few minutes yet before the sleep really takes hold. Maybe you think about that one day in summer when the sun beat down and you could walk barefoot in the grass. Maybe you remember the village feast when someone roasted a goose and you got the smallest piece of skin. You close your eyes and try to pretend it's warm again. But no such luck. A draft sneaks under the door, brushing across your face like a ghost's sigh. Your nose is freezing. Your breath clouds. You try to burrow deeper into the scratchy blankets, and someone else shifts, pulling half of it off you. You yank it back. They grunt. It's a nightly dance of elbows and grumbles. And then, if you're very fortunate, sleep finally comes. Not the peaceful kind, mind you. You'll wake up halfway through the night. Everyone does. It's what people now call segmented sleep. You'll lie there in the dark for an hour or two, maybe talk to whoever else is awake, maybe mumble a few prayers, or contemplate your sins, maybe just listen to the pigs snort in the corner. But that's for later. For now, you curl tighter, heart slow, breath thick in the frosty air. Tomorrow promises more cold, more work, and maybe, just maybe, a break in the clouds. But tonight, you're surviving. You wake with a jolt, just before dawn, your back stiff, your feet somehow colder than when you fell asleep. The hearth has burned low. Only a few orange embers pulse beneath a crust of ash, like the last heartbeat of a dying dragon. The inside of your nose feels crusty. You sit up slowly, trying not to wake the rest of the bundle of limbs you call a family bed. The air bites your skin immediately. You pull your wool tunic closer around your shoulders, but it's about as effective as hugging a damp towel. Welcome to the medieval morning. Now comes the dance of dressing without fully undressing. You don't take off clothes to sleep. You just sleep in them. Layers upon layers of wool, linen, sometimes fur, if you're lucky or unusually well connected. If you're particularly fortunate, you might have something called a hoopland, which is a long, cloak-like overgarment lined with rabbit fur or even squirrel pelts. Not exactly haute couture, but it traps heat better than a sermon traps sin. As you shuffle to the fire, you throw on whatever extra garments are available. A spare hood, a second pair of hose, mittens made from stitched scraps. You may not be fashionable, but you are now a walking stack of fibers. Your home isn't built to keep out the cold. It's built to not collapse under it. Stone foundations are a rarity. You've got packed dirt floors that feel like iron at this hour, and the walls sweat when it's too warm inside, which happens rarely, but still often enough to rot your beams. The roof above is thatched and patched. A mouse condo, if you're being honest. And the wind whistles through the tiny gaps between the reed bundles like some malicious forest spirit. So how do you keep any warmth in? Ingenuity, desperation, and a lot of, let's call them, creative insulation methods. Straw is your best friend. You shove it everywhere, between the cracks in the wall, under your bedding, around the hearth, and inside your shoes. You mix it with manure to make daub for plugging up holes. Yes, it smells. Yes, you stop noticing eventually. Until summer, that is. But you don't worry about that now, because your toes are starting to feel something again. A burning tingle, like regret. Here's a quirky tidbit you probably didn't expect. In some especially cold regions, peasants would even hang old, stiff animal skins over their doors or windows to trap heat. If you were poor, you used what you had, which often meant what had recently died. And then there's the human solution: proximity. Your bed is crammed not out of affection, but efficiency. One warm body helps. 2 is better. 6 is a furnace. Sleep stacked, sleep packed. Your body heat is the only heating system you can afford. In fact, it wasn't uncommon for entire families to sleep in one large bed, not even necessarily for rest. During the coldest nights, it was simply for survival. Parents, children, grandparents, even the dog, all squashed together like a heap of laundry that breathes. If you're not in bed, you're near the fire, which must be kept alive at all costs. You can't just strike a match and rekindle it. Fire starting is a whole ordeal. Flint and steel, if you have them. Tinder made from dried fungus or old linen. And even then, it takes time and skill. So instead, many peasants buried embers under ash overnight, preserving a tiny glow to stoke back to life in the morning. Still, you can't rely solely on fire, so you move around constantly. Chopping wood warms you twice, once while cutting, once when burning. And you eat frequently, if you have food. Your body needs fuel, like a bellows needs breath. There's no thermos of tea waiting. You have what's called pottage, a thick stew made of barley, leeks, cabbage, and whatever else didn't rot. Maybe there's some leftover ale, not the fancy kind, the kind with bits in it, and, yes, even small children drank weak ale. It was safer than most water, which could kill you faster than the cold. Historians still argue whether medieval peasants truly endured constant freezing, or whether we romanticize their hardship. Some argue the interior temperatures of peasant homes were tolerable once bodies and embers had warmed them for hours. Others point out that archaeological records show signs of chronic cold stress and frostbite, even in regions like southern England. Either way, it wasn't cozy. Now, speaking of cozy, there's one final secret weapon. Dung. Yes, you heard that right. Dried animal dung was an incredibly effective insulator and even a fuel source. It smells less than you think once dried, and it burns slow and steady. Cow patties stacked by the hearth? That's your winter log pile. Oh, and there's one more human radiator you might not expect. Infants. Babies were precious in the medieval world, not just for obvious reasons, but because they radiated heat like tiny potatoes. People wrapped them in swaddling clothes and used them like little bed warmers. If you were a sibling, you probably had to share space with one, whether you liked it or not. So, let's take stock. You're wearing everything you own. You sleep under a scratchy heap of wool and straw. Your windows are covered with waxed linen or oiled cloth that lets in light but blocks wind. Your walls are stuffed with hay, rags, or manure. You eat warm mush. You breathe smoky air. You shuffle around all day to keep your blood moving. You sleep piled together like nesting cats. And still, you're cold. But you're not dead. Which, in medieval winter, is really the gold standard. At some point in the night, or early morning, depending on how you count time, when clocks are for monasteries and not for you, you wake up, not fully, just awake. you're not alone in this. Everyone wakes up like this. It's the normal rhythm. Sleep researchers now call it segmented sleep. But you just call it that weird middle-of-the-night thing, where I'm half asleep and slightly annoyed. Your body, wrapped in layers and pressed between your grandmother's knees and your cousin's back, is still warm. But your mind? Wandering. And there's not much to do except listen to the creaks of the hut, the gentle wheeze of someone with seasonal lung issues, and the distant bark of a dog you sincerely hope is chasing a fox and not a ghost. There's no shame in being awake now. In fact, it's kind of expected. People rise and sleep in cycles. This first sleep and second sleep structure is documented in everything from letters to prayer books. That strange middle period between roughly midnight and 2 in the morning is a time for reflection, low conversation, a little mending if you're handy with needle and candlelight, and yes, some medieval-style pillow talk, which, given the general smell of the room, is a minor miracle of human optimism. It's a quiet time. You might whisper a prayer to a saint whose relics you've never seen. Maybe you tend the hearth, stoking it gently so the embers don't die. Or maybe you stare into the shadows and think about what you would do if you were lord of the manor. Which, of course, you'll never be. But it's fun to imagine building a fire bigger than a goat. The rhythms of your day are dictated by light and warmth. And because the sun still won't rise for a while, your life exists in the creases between moonlight and memory. Sometimes you get up, carefully, so as not to disturb the tightly woven cocoon of human bodies, and step toward the fire. The warmth, though faint, draws you like a moth. You might sip a cup of weak ale, or chew on a piece of bread so stale it might double as a roofing tile. This is also a time when dreams blend with waking thought. The medieval mind doesn't always separate the two. Dreams are messages, warnings, sometimes excuses. If you dream of fire, you might worry your neighbor's barn will catch alight. If you dream of wolves, you clutch your baby closer. Historians still argue whether peasants truly believed their dreams shaped fate, or whether those beliefs were more performative than heartfelt. Just another layer of cultural insulation in the long night. Sometimes, someone in the village claims they had a dream from God, or worse, from something less divine. Suddenly, there's talk of curses, of old sins, of witches living at the edge of the woods. You listen and pretend not to be frightened, but when you lie back down, you turn toward the wall, just in case. Let's not pretend this middle time is always serene. You know what else can happen in this odd pause between sleeps. Rats. They come out then, skittering across the floor, rustling the straw. You tense, hoping they're not interested in your food stash or your toes. And let's not forget bed bugs, the little medieval vampires of the mattress world. If you've never slapped your own arm in a half-dream because something was crawling on you, are you even living in 1346? But back to segmented sleep. After an hour or two of drowsy wakefulness, something changes. Your body slips back down, deeper, quieter. The second sleep takes you. It's thicker than the first. You dream more vividly. You snore more audibly. If you're lucky, this sleep carries you right up until the rooster crows, or the cold nudges you awake again. Interestingly, this two-sleep pattern wasn't just common among peasants. Even upper classes practiced it. Manuscripts from the period mention a first slepe and morrow sleep. Some people even scheduled chores or prayers during the waking break between them. Monks, of course, took it further, because nothing says holy devotion like getting up at 2 a.m. in winter to chant in a stone chapel colder than a witch's apology. Peasants like you weren't following some fancy philosophy. You just lived by nature's rhythm. Your body knew what to do when the fire dimmed and the stars blinked like sleepy guardians. Still, there were practical reasons for it. Segmented sleep helped with managing animals, children, and even, brace yourself, thieves. In the middle of the night, when some opportunist might sneak into your barn or try to lift your salted meat stash, being half awake had its benefits. Your ears stay alert even when your body rests. And yes, this is also when your village gossip mill churns slowly in whispered tones. You know who talks in their sleep. You know who groans suspiciously at odd hours. You know which cousin mutters about stolen chickens, even in dreams. Information moves during this quiet limbo. Secrets shared under breath. Promises made in the hush. No candles, though. Not for you. They're precious. Saved for high feasts or funerals. If you need light now, it's the hearth or nothing. So you squint in the dim and hope your toes avoid the bucket you use as a night chamber pot. Yes, it's right there by the door. No, you don't want to trip into it. Again. As second sleep tightens its grip, the cold recedes slightly. Or maybe your brain just stops caring. Your body accepts the discomfort the way a boat accepts a slow leak, reluctantly, but with no other options. You pull your woolen cloak tighter, bury your nose under your tunic's collar, and let the dream world reclaim you. Outside, the wind sighs and settles. Somewhere a hen rustles in her perch. The fire breathes low, steady now. You, just one of countless anonymous sleepers, drift off again. One breath, then another. The night, with all its broken pieces, slowly knits itself together again. By the time you're properly awake again, this time for good, there's just the faintest glow in the sky, and your back has fused with the mattress, like someone pasted you there. You stretch an arm toward the hearth, which is more optimism than strategy, and discover the fire is now completely out. No embers, just ash, a gray, cold monument to last night's flickering glory. The air feels sharper than before. You can see your breath like little ghosts escaping your mouth. It's time to get up, which, let's be honest, is the worst part of the day. The first thing you do is fumble around for food. Not a feast. This isn't a tavern. Your breakfast is leftover pottage if you're lucky. Pottage is your morning, noon, and night. It's a thick stew of whatever you've got on hand. Root vegetables, grains, and maybe the memory of meat. If there's no pottage left, you break a bit of rye bread with your teeth. It's chewy. It's dry. It's about as exciting as chewing your own shoe. But tonight, after another brutally cold day, your reward is the supper. The evening meal. The only warm thing you'll experience that doesn't involve singed fingers and desperate prayers. The kitchen, if you can even call it that, is just a space around the hearth. You squat there with your iron pot, stirring the slop inside like it owes you money. Dinner is pottage again, but with a twist. Perhaps some leftover kale, or a few beans you dried back in August. Maybe, if your neighbor's goat died recently, you scored a scrap of fat. You toss it in, knowing it'll melt and make the whole pot taste slightly less like boiled sock. And then there's ale, weak, brown, and absolutely essential. Everyone drinks it, because water is basically medieval roulette. You never know if that stream down the hill is going to bless you with hydration or dysentery. So you brew ale, a mild, low-alcohol version, just strong enough to kill microbes, but weak enough that even toddlers drink it. It's cloudy, a bit sour, and yes, it might have floating bits. You just stir and carry on. Sometimes you supplement your meal with cold cabbage, or turnips, or dried peas. And if you're really living the high life, a hunk of cheese so hard it could moonlight as a weapon. Meat? Rare. Reserved for holidays, weddings, funerals. Or if you're lucky enough to trap a rabbit that no one else sees. just don't let the Lord's gamekeeper catch you, or you'll lose more than your dinner. This evening, meal isn't a grand event. It's just function over flair. You sit by the hearth, eating from a wooden bowl, using a spoon that's been handed down so many generations, it probably has a backstory. You chew slowly, grateful for the warmth more than the flavor. Still, there are some odd treats. In the colder months, people sometimes made frumenti, a kind of porridge with boiled wheat, milk, if you had it, and maybe honey or dried fruit on feast days. It's sweet, filling, and a rare moment of joy that tastes like something your stomach doesn't immediately resent. Of course, food preservation is half your job in the winter. Root vegetables are stored in cellars or buried underground. Meat, when available, is salted, dried, or smoked over the hearth, turning it into something between food and punishment. Butter is rare and precious. Eggs, fewer in winter, as hens lay less. And milk? Only if your cow or goat isn't pregnant or dry. There's no quick run to the shop here. Your larder is what you raised, gathered, or bartered. But this is also when you appreciate just how clever peasants really were. You've got underground storage pits lined with straw and earth. You've got smokehouses made from clay and sticks. You ferment, pickle, and preserve with salt, ash, and vinegar, long before the word probiotic enters the human vocabulary. And let's not forget bread. It's coarse, dark, and baked from rye, barley, or whatever grains survived the rats and weather. You don't waste anything. Even stale bread has a second life, soaked in broth, fried in lard, or crumbled into soups. Waste not, starve not. Historians still argue whether the average peasant diet was healthier than ours today. Some claim it was full of natural fiber, legumes, and seasonal ingredients, kind of like a depressing Whole30. Others point to the malnutrition, lack of protein, and scurvy-like symptoms that plagued entire villages by midwinter. The truth? Probably somewhere between those two bowls of pottage. As you eat, the room fills with steam and voices. People talk about their day, the work done, the tools broken, the rumors about that one monk who may be turned into a goat. You laugh softly or grunt. Conversation is subdued. Everyone is tired. Everyone is cold. But for a moment, there's warmth in your chest that isn't from cabbage water. Then comes the end of supper and the slow shuffle back to the bedding. You scrape the last bits from the pot, maybe feed a few to the chickens huddled in the corner. Yes, Your livestock is inside. You didn't miss that. You stretch your feet toward the fading fire and wonder if tomorrow might be warmer. It probably won't be. But at least your stomach isn't empty. That's something. That's survival. You pull your cloak tighter, feel the weight of the day settle over you like another layer of rough wool. And as the firelight flickers on the beams above your head, you close your eyes and let the supper slowly lull you toward sleep once more. Dreams flavored faintly with turnip. You're just drifting off again when something large and wet snuffles against your face. It's the pig. Of course it is. The pig lives here too, along with a few chickens and maybe a goat, if you're particularly blessed, or cursed, depending on the goat's temperament. These aren't pets. They're heat sources, alarm systems, garbage disposals, and emergency food supplies, all rolled into one. And tonight, they are in your bedroom, because there's no other bedroom. Animals aren't just tolerated indoors during winter. They're invited. You don't have a barn, not unless you live on one of the wealthier strips of land in the village. Even then, the barn's not heated, and letting animals freeze would be like letting your money shiver to death. So you let them in. The pig, with its warm, grumbling body, nestles near the fire or against the door. The chickens roost up in the rafters if they can. Sometimes they fall down in the night. This is accepted. You just step over them. And while it's technically your house, you don't exactly have domain over it. The pig goes where the pig wants. If it decides your straw mattress looks appealing, well, you're negotiating space with an animal that outweighs your children and has better instincts for staying warm. You share the floor with hooves and feathers. The smells are what you'd expect. A complex layering of sweat, smoke, manure, and something only describable as barn adjacent. But you get used to it. You have to. Your nose stops complaining before your lungs do. There's a common medieval expression, as snug as a pig in muck. What they don't say is that you're probably the one sharing that muck, especially during the frostbitten months. That pig isn't just your livestock. It's your bedmate, space heater, and occasional scapegoat for strange night sounds. But there's an unexpected comfort to this little ecosystem. The clucking, snorting, snuffling, and soft stomping of your animal companions becomes a background hum of life. You listen, half asleep, to the goat chewing something you're almost sure is part of your laundry. You make a mental note to check in the morning. You won't. Historians have long debated just how many animals shared indoor living space with peasants. Some say it was only in the harshest winters. Others argue it was constant, a year-round symbiosis where the lines between home and barn blurred entirely. And while archaeological evidence shows domestic dwellings with adjacent animal quarters, you know the truth. If it keeps you from freezing to death, it's part of the family. There's even folklore tied to this nightly cohabitation. It was said that animals could speak on Christmas Eve, but only at midnight, and only if they were treated well. Of course, you've never heard the pig say much, except feed me in oinks. But you're still nice to it, just in case. One never knows which soul might be listening through 4 muddy hooves and a twitching tail. You might think the animals would disturb your sleep. And they do. A chicken flaps down unexpectedly. The pig snores like a broken bellows. But strangely, their presence is also reassuring. They're warm. They're alive. They mean you haven't starved yet. You wake sometimes to the sound of scratching. Rodents, probably. Maybe a weasel. The animals stir too. The goat bleats. The pig grunts. One of the chickens emits a sort of existential cluck. The house resets. You roll over and drift again. And this is how you live through winter. The walls are thin. The roof leaks. But the combined body heat of your family, your livestock, and the ever-determined pig brings the room to a sort of bearable gloom. Not comfort, not even warmth, but a step above shivering death. There's also a social element to all this proximity. Your bed isn't private. Your family sees everything, hears everything. There's no such thing as solitude. Children fall asleep next to parents. Siblings pile up in a row like logs, fidgeting and elbowing through dreams. You wake up with someone's foot in your mouth and don't even question it. Sometimes there's a visitor, a cousin traveling from another village, a neighbor whose roof caved under the snow. Hospitality isn't optional. There's an unspoken understanding. The more bodies, the more warmth. You just hope the visitor doesn't snore louder than the pig. You fall into a rhythm. You stop noticing the chicken hopping over your feet. You stop reacting to the pig's occasional dreams. Yes, it twitches in its sleep, just like a dog. You don't even flinch when the goat tries to eat your bedding again. This is your winter routine. Shared warmth, shared discomfort, shared survival. And in the middle of the night, when you stir and see the silhouette of your family, your livestock, and the dim glow of the fire you thought had gone out, you feel something like peace, or maybe just resignation with a dash of gratitude. No, it's not glamorous. But then again, glamour doesn't keep you alive when the wind's howling through the cracks in the wall and your nose is frozen solid. You lie back, arm over your eyes, breathing in the heady mix of animals, smoke, and wool. Your stomach is still digesting that cabbage, and the pig lets out one last sleepy grunt. And just like that, you fall asleep again, surrounded by beasts, bundled in humanity, and somehow still dreaming of spring. The morning has barely broken when someone coughs loud enough to wake half the household. You roll over, groaning, and blink against the grayish light leaking through the window cloth. Outside, the frost still clings to every surface. Inside, you're shivering, and not because the dream where your neighbor turned into a goat came back. The hearth is cold, not just barely warm cold, dead cold. Your heart sinks a little, because when the fire dies completely, your day begins with a problem. Starting a new fire isn't like clicking a lighter. It's a ritual, a task, a test of your winter luck. You kneel beside the hearth, breath fogging, and dig through the ash. You're looking, hoping for a scrap of ember that maybe, just maybe, survived the night. Sometimes, buried under enough ash, one small coal holds on to life. If you find one, you cradle it like a newborn and feed it little bits of kindling. Dry grass, bark, lint, straw. You blow gently. Whisper your best curses. Watch. Wait. No glow. The hearth is dead. And now you're in real trouble. You could try flint and steel, but those aren't exactly common tools in your peasant kit. If you do have them, you still need dry tinder. Easier said than done in a home where dry is a theoretical concept. Everything's damp. The walls are damp. The straw's damp. You're damp. And now your mood is too. So here comes the desperate plan. The ember run. You wrap yourself in your cloak. Shove your feet into boots that were never waterproof, even when new, which they aren't. And grab a pot, metal or clay, anything that'll carry a live coal. You're going to the neighbors. You trudge through snow that crunches with the sound of frozen regret and arrive at their door, teeth chattering. You knock, already feeling guilty for what you're about to ask. Do you have fire? If they like you and have enough embers to spare, they might let you in. You crouch by their hearth, lift a glowing coal with an iron tong or charred stick, drop it into your pot, padded with moss or ash, and run back home like you're holding the Holy Grail. But sometimes they're out too, or they pretend to be. You stand there, pot in hand, looking like the saddest contestant in a survival game no one asked to play. In true emergencies, you might head to the village church. The priest, being spiritually and structurally better insulated than most, probably has a good fire going. Churches often serve as heat havens during brutal stretches. But again, there's etiquette. You bring news, a small offering, or just a winning look of pitiful desperation. Because without fire, your day and your night stalls. You can't cook. You can't warm. You can't dry your boots, heat your water, or roast the lice out of your blanket. Fire is everything. There's a saying, "Let the fire go out, and the house goes with it." It's not just poetry. It's the medieval version of "Don't forget to plug in your phone," except the stakes are frostbite and starvation. And yet, peasants found creative ways to keep fire alive. Some used banked fires, piling up ash and covering embers to protect them through the night. Others developed fire dogs, iron bars that held burning logs above the ash for better airflow and longer burns. Some even fashioned slow-burning fuel balls made of dried manure and straw, a technique still used in parts of the world today. Historians still argue whether fire starting was truly a daily burden, or if most homes had dependable ways to maintain flame. Evidence suggests it was a bit of both. Some days you got lucky. Others, you ended up begging coal from a neighbor whose expression said, "Again?" There's also the mysterious art of fire by friction, rubbing sticks together until a spark forms. But let's be honest, you've tried it. It's hard. It's cold. You have blisters. And the pig is watching you with judgmental eyes. So fire becomes your obsession. Your evening routine centers on it, feeding it, shielding it, whispering to it like it's a sulky relative. If someone accidentally kicks a log out of the hearth in the night, you wake up from the sheer wrongness of the silence. Fire is life, but it's also danger. In winter, a roaring fire can quickly become an inferno. Thatched roofs, straw floors, hanging fabrics. Your entire home is a tinderbox, which is why many peasants slept with one eye open when the flames burned high. Sometimes fires were started not by carelessness, but by desperation. A neighbor may try to burn damp wood, leading to a room full of choking smoke. Someone might use an unfamiliar fuel and end up torching half the ceiling. You've heard stories, houses gone in minutes, whole families sleeping just a bit too deeply. Still, the alternative is worse. So each night, you build the fire again. You squat by it, hands outstretched, feeling the return of blood to your fingertips. The pig draws close. The goat, as usual, tries to eat the firewood. You swat it gently. It stares, unbothered. And you think, again, about the miracle of warmth. It's not guaranteed. It's earned. Every log chopped, every ember saved, every ember begged. You don't take it for granted, not when you've spent a morning trudging barefoot across a dirt floor that feels like a frozen lake. Tonight, when you wrap yourself in your cloak and curl near the hearth, you'll still be cold, but not dangerously so. And that's the point. The fire flickers now, rising from the ashes like a sleepy phoenix. You watch it catch. You smile, just a little. You've done it again. Another night won. One glowing coal at a time. It starts with a sneeze. Then someone's hacking into their elbow, except sleeves aren't particularly hygienic when you've been wiping your nose on them all winter. The hut fills with the unmistakable sound of a shared cold tightening its grip on the household. Winter doesn't just chill you, it invades you. It creeps into your lungs, your joints, your blood. You wake up feeling like your bones were replaced with frozen twigs, and the nose you were born with now leaks like a holy wineskin. You're not surprised. No one is. Illness is the season's other great companion, right alongside hunger and the pig. You sniffle into a strip of old linen. There's no such thing as tissues. You blow your nose with the enthusiasm of someone scraping out a cooking pot. The noise echoes through the hut. Someone else coughs in solidarity. You've got what people now might call a head cold, but to you, it's just the usual. A snot-stuffed, wheezing kind of misery that settles in with the frost and lingers like a rude guest. Your eyes are watery. Your throat feels like you swallowed splinters. But you still have to fetch water, still have to dig turnips, still have to exist. And then there's the chill blains. You rub your feet, feeling the familiar sting of cold, damaged skin. Red, swollen, itchy, like your toes are trying to revolt against your entire body. Historians today know this condition results from repeated exposure to cold and humidity without actual freezing. In medieval terms, you just call it winter feet. There's no cure. Only wool socks, if you have them. And maybe soaking them in stale ale when things get desperate. You've heard stories that garlic helps, so you crush some, wrap it in cloth, and tie it around your foot. Now you're itchy and smell like dinner. Someone in the house is wheezing. That deep, wet kind of cough that makes you wince. It's probably your uncle. He's been sick since Michaelmas, and there's a faint rattle in his chest that even the pig seems concerned about. You try to help. Hot broth, if you have it. Honey, if the bees were generous this year. And if all else fails, you try the strangest remedy in your mother's memory. A spoonful of urine, warmed slightly, mixed with herbs. You wrinkle your nose, but you're not the one drinking it. This is the kind of medicine that gets passed down with such confidence that no one questions it, until centuries later, when someone writes a book with words like infection vectors, and don't do that, but you're working with what you've got. There are no doctors nearby, unless you count the local wise woman who once cured a boil by singing to it. Some of her methods make sense. Elderberry tea, dried yarrow, mustard poultices. Others are more interpretive. She once tied a dead mouse around your neighbor's neck to ward off a sore throat. It didn't work. But she insists the mouse was spiritually distracted. When someone's truly sick, your options narrow. Leeching might help, they say, or it might just make them weaker. Bleeding is a popular remedy too, performed with a knife, a horn, or a sharp piece of bone. You lie them down, open a vein, and hope the illness flows out with the blood. It sounds barbaric, but for centuries, people believed that balance in the body meant balance in blood. Too much heat or moisture, time to bleed. And let's not forget charms. A ribbon around the neck, a coin under the tongue, a cross drawn in soot on the forehead, anything to protect the soul while the body fights its slow, cold battle. Some winters, illness creeps through the whole village. It starts in one hut and makes its rounds like a determined tax collector. You bury your nose in a blanket that hasn't been washed since last harvest and pray for mercy. Not divine mercy, just the kind where you don't lose another cousin this year. You remember last year. The black cough took 3 of them in February. One went fast, the others lingered. You tried everything, kept them warm, gave them broth, sang psalms. In the end, they passed in their sleep, bundled in the same wool they were born in. Still, life goes on, even when your nose is a fountain and your joints creak like a church door. You trudge through snow to check the chickens. You break the ice in the water bucket. You help your neighbor dig out the path to the well. No one's waiting for you to feel better. You work through it, cough and all. But there are lighter moments, too. Someone in the family sneezes so loud it startles the pig into toppling a stool. You all laugh. A wheezy, congested chorus of giggles. It's not much, but it's human. That spark of humor in the middle of the misery. There's also a bizarre little fringe belief in your village that a particularly loud sneeze might actually clear the devil out. So every time someone lets loose, a relative whispers, "God bless you," not out of habit, but just in case something spiritually slimy just got ejected from their skull. Sometimes, for fun, you try weird cures. Roasted onion poultices on the chest, vinegar-soaked cloths, soup made with crushed eggshells. You even heard someone mention rubbing a black cat on your throat to cure hoarseness. You don't have a black cat. And honestly, that one sounds more like an excuse to harass cats than actual medicine. Historians still argue whether these remedies helped or were just desperate distractions. Some plant-based treatments had real medicinal properties. Others were just ritual comfort. But you do what your grandmother did, and what her grandmother did. Because in a world without certainty, tradition is as close to science as you get. And somehow, despite the odds, most people pull through. Your body, cold battered and snot covered, gets used to the winter rhythm. Your immune system, forged in dirt and smoke and goat drool, is tougher than it looks. You heal slowly, or you don't. But either way, you face the cold again, coughing all the while. You're not comfortable, you're not thriving, but you're alive. And in the medieval world, that's medicine enough. By now, winter has thoroughly set in. The frost no longer surprises you. It's just part of the scenery. You feel it in your fingertips and your knees, especially your knees. They creak like old hinges every morning. And you start to walk with the careful shuffle of someone twice your age, which, to be fair, in peasant years, is not saying much. You begin the day, as always, layering up. It's a process. You don't just throw on a coat and head out. You build your winter armor from the skin outwards. First comes your base layer, a linen shirt, perhaps patched and re-stitched so many times it looks like a quilt with sleeves. Then hose made of wool, your legs' only real protection from the cold ground. Over that, a tunic or kirtle. If you're lucky, it reaches your knees. If you're really lucky, it doesn't have holes in it the size of a baby squirrel. The wool is coarse, thick. It scratches you in places you didn't know could itch, but it's warm, or warmish. And that's what counts. Your outerwear is the crown jewel, a cloak, thick, heavy, and hooded, fastened with a wooden pin, or, if you've been gifted one, a simple brass clasp. Cloaks are more than fashion. They're portable shelters, windbreakers, blankets, sometimes pillows. Yours smells faintly of old fires, wet hay, and that time you slipped into a dung heap on your feet. Boots. Or, more accurately, foot-shaped optimism. They're made of stitched leather, thin, worn, and barely waterproof. The seams leak. The soles are patched with extra scraps. If you're lucky, you've stuffed straw into them for insulation. If you're unlucky, the straw's already soggy from yesterday's walk through the frozen path by the stream. And then there's your hat. It's not glamorous. It's a hood, really. Part of your cloak or a separate coif. A snug-fitting linen cap worn under a woolen outer layer. It's tied under your chin and makes you look like a very grumpy turnip. Still, it keeps your ears from turning black and falling off, which is the gold standard of medieval winter wear. Gloves? Rare. Maybe you have mittens, or maybe you just wrap rags around your hands and hope for the best. Some peasants used the sleeves of their tunics like makeshift mitts, tucking their fingers inside and walking around with the tragic look of someone who just gave up on buttons entirely. Historians still argue whether peasants actually had winter wardrobes in any meaningful sense. Some evidence suggests people simply layered what they had, using their best woolen garments regardless of season. Others believe there was a seasonal shift. Thicker cloaks in winter, lighter tunics in summer. What is certain is this: you wear whatever you can get your hands on, and you repair everything, constantly. Your boots are mended with thread made from flax and sinew. Your tunic has been stitched so many times, it's more patch than original fabric. You resole your shoes with leather from an old saddle. You've even sewn your hat back together with pig bristle. No part of your outfit is new. No part of it is perfect. But every bit matters. Your neighbors eye your cloak with envy or pity. Everyone knows what everyone else wears. If someone's cloak seems warmer, you notice. If someone has fur trim, they've either been incredibly lucky or recently visited a furrier or possibly stolen it. You don't ask. And it's not just about survival. It's about status. Clothing tells stories. That tunic dyed brown with walnut husks, homemade. That bluish scarf, a rare gift from a trader. That stitched emblem on your hat, probably decorative, possibly mistaken for a religious symbol, and definitely your cousin's attempt at embroidery after too much ale. You tie a belt of rope or leather around your waist, not for style, but to hold your knife, your pouch, and maybe a rag to wipe your nose. Buttons are rare, laces more common. You fumble with them every morning like a sleepy spider trying to tie its shoes. And despite all this preparation, you still feel the cold. It's in your bones, in your teeth, in the aching space between your shoulder blades, where the wind always finds a way in. But your clothes aren't meant to make you comfortable. They're meant to keep you barely above freezing. Now, about that fashion. Peasant winter wear isn't haute couture, but it has its quirks. Some women wear woolen wimples or veils under their cloaks, which freeze stiff in harsh weather and make you feel like you're wrapped in a board. Men sometimes wear chaperones, hooded capes with long tails that can be wrapped around the neck like a scarf. Functional, yes. Stylish? Let's just say it's a look. There are fringe habits, too. Some people line their shoes with moss. Others rub lard into the seams to waterproof them. You once tried wrapping your feet in parchment someone discarded at the church. It worked for half an hour and then crumbled dramatically during a sprint to catch a runaway goat. Still, every morning, you dress on, you layer, you adjust your hood, stuff straw into your boots, tighten your belt, and step outside like you're ready for battle. Because you are. The enemy is the cold, and today you intend to win. At least until nightfall. You pass neighbors doing the same awkward winter waddle, cloaks wrapped tight, hands tucked under arms. You nod, exchange a few words. Everyone looks half frozen and vaguely angry. It's the winter face, but there's a quiet pride in your resilience. Every patch on your tunic is proof that you've lasted another season. Every threadbare sock says, "I'm still here." So you walk through the cold, clothes flapping like tired flags, boots squelching in slush, hood sagging in the snow. And you think, not for the first time, at least the pig's warm. Winter drags on, and though every day feels like a repetition of the last, cold breath, cold feet, cold soup, there's a strange flicker of warmth buried deep in the season, the feast days. And chief among them, nestled in the bleakest stretch of the year, is the Yuletide. You don't call it Christmas in the modern, blinking lights sense. You call it Christmastide, or Yule, or just the feast. And in this frozen world of hardship and hay-stuffed boots, it becomes the one moment when warmth is more than just a flickering fire. It's a mood, a rare, fleeting pulse of life. The night air is sharp as a knife, but your home smells better than usual. Someone brought in dried herbs to throw over the hearth, and for once, the smoke has a hint of rosemary and maybe even some pine. The pig's been put outside, temporarily, and there's space to breathe. Not much food, of course, but more than usual. The village comes together to pool supplies, a bit of ale, some root vegetables. If you're incredibly lucky, someone caught a goose. If not, there's dried fish that's been soaking all day in a pot so it doesn't taste like sadness. You gather in the dim glow of tallow candles, rare treasures reserved for such occasions. They sputter and smoke, dripping wax down whatever rock or log is acting as your makeshift candelabra. Shadows dance on the ceiling. Children lean in close, wide-eyed and snot-nosed, watching the flames like it's magic. And in a way, it is. Because for one night, the house feels full. Not just with people, but with life. Laughter. Music. Someone has a battered flute. Someone else claps a rhythm against their leg. The songs are simple. Chants, rounds, or nonsense verses that rhyme just enough to stick in your head until spring. The older folks tell stories, and you listen. Tales of saints walking across frozen lakes, of bread that never ran out, of a night when animals talked to each other in Latin. No one questions the details. You nod solemnly as someone insists that if you place your shoes facing east at midnight, the Virgin Mary might visit your dreams. Worth a try. There's also the dark side of winter lore. Everyone knows that ghosts wander more freely during the cold months. Spirits of the restless dead. Souls who died unshriven. Forest creatures that prey on lost travelers. You pretend not to shiver. But when someone knocks on the door unexpectedly during the feast, half the room jumps. Historians still argue whether medieval peasants truly believed in such winter spirits, or whether it was the ale talking. But the stories persist. You leave a crust of bread by the door for passing souls. A little ale, too, if you're feeling generous, or if last year's frost took someone you loved. Your local priest has warned you against such superstitions. Focus on the nativity, he says. Think of the light in the darkness. And you do. But you also carve little charms into the beams. You also mutter a rhyme under your breath when the wind sounds too much like a voice. Midwinter is a time of paradox. It's holy, but eerie, joyful, but tense. You're surrounded by others, but still feel the edges of something colder than snow, deeper than the earth beneath your home. And so you cling to traditions, not because they make sense, but because they anchor you. You sip warm broth, spiced with something you can't name. You bite into dried fruit someone smuggled from the market months ago. It tastes like sunlight. For once, your stomach is more than half full. Someone dances badly. The floor creaks underfoot. A baby laughs. A pig outside squeals. And the world, despite everything, feels almost okay. But it doesn't last. The fire burns low again. The candles are nearly gone. And as people curl up into sleep, the cold reclaims the room inch by inch. You wrap yourself in your cloak, already dreading the morning. Even in the depth of winter, there's work to do. Snow to shovel, tools to repair, roofs to patch. But for one night, you felt more than survival. You felt celebration, a kind of medieval joy that doesn't sparkle. It just glows faintly, like an ember buried under ash, waiting to be stirred. And then there's the old woman's voice again, whispering from her corner. She tells you, half asleep, that the night after the feast is the thinnest of all. The barrier between the living and the dead stretched tight as thread. If you dream of someone long gone, don't speak to them. Don't let them touch you. You nod, pretending not to believe. But when you finally drift off, buried in a pile of cloaks and cousins, you sleep facing the wall, just in case. The cold is still here. It hasn't left, not really. But something has shifted. A little more light in the mornings. A softness to the wind that hints, just barely, at mercy. It's still January, maybe February, and you're not foolish enough to put away your cloak, but the frost on the door isn't quite as thick. You wake up to the sound of dripping, real dripping. Water, not icicles creaking like bones in the wind, but honest to goodness melt. You don't celebrate. Not yet. But your body notices before your mind does. You stretch a little longer when you wake, not because you're warm, but because you're less cold. And in a medieval winter, that alone feels like a feast. The nights remain long, but they aren't infinite. You start rising a bit earlier without as much reluctance. Your feet still hit a dirt floor, still find straw-packed boots, but the air doesn't slice quite as sharply against your skin. The fire, this morning, still lives. Not a blaze, not even a flicker, but an ember, shy and waiting. You coax it back to life with practiced hands. Outside, mud returns. Thick, sticky, unavoidable. It's the price of thaw. You used to curse it, but now, mud means warmth. Mud means change. The snow retreats in patchy layers, revealing flattened grasses and forgotten tools buried for weeks. Chickens peck with more energy. The goat seems to complain slightly less. You hear birds again. Not many, but enough to remind you the world isn't dead, only dormant. Work picks up. You fetch water without slipping. You repair fences that cracked under frost. You gather what little firewood remains, rationing it with the skill of someone who's done this every year and still doesn't quite trust spring. But your mind is ahead of the season. You imagine planting. You think of green, of soil that gives instead of swallows, of bare feet on warm earth, even though your toes are still wrapped in 3 layers of damp wool. Historians still debate whether medieval peasants experienced true seasons as we think of them, or simply oscillated between harvest and hunger. But you know better. You feel the shift, not just in weather, but in mood, in the way your mother hums while stirring the pot, in the way people speak of plans instead of problems. It's not just survival now, it's hope. You go about your day with less dread. You pause more often to watch the smoke rise straight into the sky. You squint into the low-hanging sun and almost smile. Your clothes are still ragged. Your boots still leak. But you think, maybe next month I can dry them properly. You imagine laundry strung across hedgerows, tunics flapping like banners of victory. The goat will probably eat half of it, but that's a problem for a warmer day. At night, you still bundle up, still curl beside the fire, still share your sleeping space with your siblings, your animals, your snoring aunt. But your dreams are lighter now. You dream of walking without a cloak, of open windows, of sun-warmed stones. The coldest nights are behind you. Not that it's easy. You're still hungry more days than not. The food stocks are low. The pottage is thinner. Bread stretches further, but only because there's less to put on it. You've chewed enough dried peas to know the texture of disappointment. Yet there's a feast coming, a real one. Maybe Easter, maybe a local saint's day. You can already taste the fresh milk, the first eggs of spring. Maybe someone will find honey. Maybe there'll be a roast, or just more bread, still. Fresh bread. Your hands are calloused, your skin cracked, your lips chapped beyond repair. But you have lived through it again. You've walked the line between frost and fever. You've rationed wood, bartered for coals, snuggled a pig, sipped ale that tasted like pond water, and eaten a cabbage that fought back. And here you are. Some years, not everyone makes it. You know their names. You carry them with you in silence. Their beds remain empty. Their cloaks hang by the door, unmoved. Winter does that. It takes. Quietly. Efficiently. But it also leaves. Eventually. Tonight, as you sit by the fire, the hut smells different. Damp wool, of course, and the faint tang of smoke, but also something green. Someone laid pine boughs on the floor to freshen the place. You breathe in, almost smile. Outside, The stars are brighter. The frost is lighter. A breeze slips through the gap in the wall and kisses your cheek instead of biting it. And you think, we've made it. Tomorrow, the same chores, the same cold boots, the same grumpy goat, but also sunlight, melt, the first signs of return. You wrap yourself in your cloak one last time, listen to the pig's sleepy snuffle, and close your eyes. It's not comfort, but it's no longer survival. It's the start of something else. So now you rest. The cold has pulled back, like a tide retreating from the shore of your little hut. The fire burns low, steady, safe. The walls don't creak so much anymore. The wind outside is no longer a threat, just a soft reminder that the world still turns, even in silence. You've made it through the hardest nights, the ones where every breath was a cloud, every floorboard was ice, and every corner of the room held a shiver waiting to strike. You remember the aching fingers, the smoky air, the sound of the pig curling up just behind your back, the scrape of a spoon in an empty bowl, the whisper of your own thoughts when everyone else had fallen asleep. But tonight, none of that matters. Tonight, you're wrapped in warmth, in memory, in the hush that follows a long, weary struggle. You lie still, every limb heavy, every muscle softening. The stories of saints and spirits fade to gentle nonsense. The straw doesn't scratch as much. The itch in your throat is gone. You hear someone breathing, slow, steady, familiar. Maybe it's a sibling. Maybe it's you. The fire crackles once, like a lullaby sung by glowing wood. Outside, the frost still lingers, but it no longer feels like a threat. Just part of the season, melting by inches. And inside, you drift, deeper and deeper, into the quiet dark, into rest, into peace, into sleep.